Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Steven Nehrenz with This Week in Weather.
Hi everyone, Meteorologist Steven Nehrenz here. Welcome to another edition of This Week in Weather on this January 20th. As I always say, greatly appreciate you joining me as we bring you these episodes every week from our News on 6 digital studio. And boy, do we have some interesting weather to talk about coming our way later this week that I'm sure you've been hearing a lot of chatter about already from a winter weather standpoint. We're going to get right into that here in just a moment. Again, as I always start with, you know where to find me. If you've got questions, comments, suggestions on what you would like to hear me discuss on this week in weather, which, by the way, I did get several suggestions here in the last several days. But again, there's my email address, my Facebook page on the screen. Also, comments on our on these videos on our News on 6 weather YouTube channel. If you comment there, I see it, and I can kind of write those down. Which, by the way, like I mentioned last week, I had after last week's episode several suggestions from folks on topics they'd like to hear discussed. That I was planning to get into a couple of these today if we didn't have active weather finally showing up. But these are all things that as we get down the line, and maybe we have quieter weather weeks, that I can kind of go through some of these about some different questions about types of tornadoes and different types of lightning and Virgo, which actually, by the way, late last week we had a really cool Virgo display that we can discuss that down the line as well. And also there was a question that I had thought about possibly answering this week. When was the last winter with no snow in Green Country or in Tulsa, which, at this point we've basically only had some snowflakes in Tulsa and that's it. Well, it looks like that's going to come to an end at the end of this week, at least the way that we're going right now. So again, thank you for the questions for those that have submitted them. And like I said, as we get down, the line, like next several weeks, I'll try to answer these as we go along and kind of give you a heads up if you ask these questions that I'll be answering those. But like I said, the weather has now finally taken an active wintry turn. And there's a lot for us to discuss, so we're going to kind of get right into what's headed our way with the growing potential for a winter storm and potentially what could be a significant winter storm for the end of the week into the weekend. So you can see that jet stream pattern here. Like to show you the big picture a lot to kind of show you, where the steering currents, we like to call them, are in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. And I know you've heard me say this a lot because it's been this way for a large majority of the winter, is that there's been, we've had kind of a northwest flow pattern across, the northeastern portions of the country, which has continually been steering the brunt of the Arctic air and the brunt of the winter storms, major winter storms across the northern and northeastern United States and also the Great Lakes. And the further south and southwest you've headed, which includes us, we've been pretty warm as a whole for most of the winter, and as you know, pretty dry with our continuing drought building. Well, we still have that general setup right now, but there are some changes on the way over the next few days by the end of the week. Kind of zooming the picture out there to the Pacific Ocean, there's where our weekend storm system is. So that upper level ridge still kind of sandwiched in between the storm systems out in the Pacific and that northwest flow, that kind of cold Arctic air flow across the northeastern United States. This system, there's actually kind of two different upper level lows in the Pacific, but that second one, that southern one, kind of becomes the dominant one over the next day or two. Now, what I've put on the map right there, I just animated that little number to show you how far away that storm system still currently is from Oklahoma. It's 2,000 miles away. Okay, that's as we get into all of the discussions of where the forecast is trending so far, what could still change. That's always something that we bring up right away. This storm system is still 2,000 miles away. So there will still be changes over the next few days as the forecast models continue to get a better hold on where exactly that system and the upper level lift that's associated with it tracks. Because around here, we most often to get kind of the ideal winter storm setup, and I mean, when I say ideal, like a big winter storm, a big snowstorm around here, we kind of have to have almost everything lined up almost perfectly, compared to other, what would you call, snow-prone areas of the country, where they just have the cold air more frequently, they have the moisture more frequently, or they have the storm tracks more frequently. Obviously, as you know, if you've lived here for any amount of time, it's only a handful of times each winter, if that we kind of get everything lining up where the cold air is moving in, we've got the upper level lift, the storm system, and kind of the timing of all those coming together at the right time to produce significant snow. But when the system's still 2,000 miles away, that means that there can still be changes in the upper level storm track, and even small changes in the track, small changes in the moisture and the temperature can all have big impacts on what's going to happen, 3-4 days down the line. Now, here's kind of the trend where we're going now to the end of the week is that, well, guess what? More Arctic air building up in Canada comes spilling south into the northern plains and the Great Lakes by Thursday. And then by Friday, excuse me, the leading edge of that Arctic air starts to sink south into green country and keeps sinking south through the weekend. There's that storm system. Look off kind of the left side of the screen. Comes drifting out of the Pacific Northwest into the southwestern United States as we head into the weekend by Saturday, and then kind of what we call phases itself into the bigger jet stream flow by Sunday. So really, reasonably, this is the first time all winter that we have had these two big variables lining up at the same time, where the Arctic air is here, it's cold enough for wintry precipitation, and there's significant upper level lift and a strong enough upper level storm system to produce, potentially significant wintry precipitation. Obviously, we've had a few little bouts of mostly light snow in a few locations this winter, but for those of you that are snow lovers, this is the kind of setup that we've been kind of waiting on all winter. Still does not mean it's an absolute guarantee. I want to make that very clear. And again, I'm not trying to waffle on and be too wishy-washy on the forecast. Just being honest about the fact that there will still be some changes, small changes to the storm track and the moisture can lead to big changes in the forecast by the end of the week. But those are kind of the two of the biggest important variables that have been lining up like this for several days now. That's why there has been growing confidence in a potentially impactful winter storm, not only for Oklahoma, but a large swath of the southern United States into the southeast United States even over the weekend. So again, the Arctic air, the cold air portion of this, of course, that's obviously one of the big variables that we're always looking for, right? And sometimes in these winter storm setups, the cold air doesn't quite get here in time, or it's a couple degrees too warm, or those sorts of things. This time around, the cold air doesn't look like it's going to be a problem or something that's going to keep us from having wintry precipitation. It's been a pretty solid trend for days now that the Arctic air comes spilling in on Friday and it just gets colder and colder and colder as we head into Saturday with temperatures way below freezing. So it doesn't appear that this time around we're going to have issues where, we're 1 or 2 degrees too warm and snow turns back into rain or sleet or freezing rain or anything like that. It doesn't look like we've got as much of that of an issue this time around. Now, there could still be some varying precipitation types. We'll talk about that in a second. Again, as I just showed you on the big picture, we've got more significant lift in the different levels of the atmosphere as that upper level air pattern shifts with that storm system north southwest. So the long and short of it, like I already said, is the chance for impactful accumulating wintry precipitation continues to increase. The good idea right now, right off the bat, is here's we're recording this on Tuesday. We're talking about this system for Friday into Saturday. We've got time here for the next few days to plan ahead for one, bitter cold air. I want to make that very clear. I know everyone always focuses on the precipitation part of this. It is going to be extremely cold this weekend, both in areas that see wintry, significant, snow accumulation, and in areas that maybe see lighter accumulations. Either way, it is going to be very cold. We have a potential several day stretch where temperatures stay solidly below freezing from the weekend, even maybe into the first half of next week. So plan for a several day stretch of bitterly cold air and the growing potential that we could have some significant travel impacts, not just here in Oklahoma and Green Country, but across a good portion of the country. I mentioned earlier, again, when we talk about all the competing variables, different variables for a winter storm system to set up around here, often one of the things that we're watching for is a layer of warm air aloft. It more often than not, this is something that is a factor that comes into play with our winter storm systems around here, where a little wedge of what we'd say slightly warmer air, meaning air that's above freezing, kind of wedges itself in between the cold air at the surface and then the very cold air up kind of at cloud level, right? And when that happens, that's when we can end up with, varying precipitation times where maybe, we just end up with rain because there's just a little too much warm air aloft. Or, the snow is falling from the clouds, it melts into that warmer air aloft and then doesn't have time to refreeze into snow before it reaches the ground. And so we end up with freezing rain or sleet. Again, this time around, it appears that we're kind of on well, let me go this way here, the right side of that panel, where it's pretty cold air from the ground level all the way up to pretty much all levels of the atmosphere, where we don't really have that warm nose, we call it a warm nose, like a little wedge of warmer air working in to melt what would be, what looks to be primarily snow with the system. Again, there could be some spots in southeastern Oklahoma, I think on Friday to start off with kind of a mixed bag of precipitation, but it appears that just because of how cold the Arctic air is coming in with the system from the ground all the way up to thousands and thousands of feet above our heads, that snow will be the primary precipitation type for the majority of us for the majority of this winter system. That's what I'm showing you here, is that it looks like snow will be the predominant precipitation type. Again, Friday, kind of when the first wave moves in Friday, like Friday afternoon, in southeastern Oklahoma, you may start off with more of kind of a wintry mix, but then as the cold air continues to deepen from late Friday through Saturday, snow becomes the primary precipitation type. And it looks like here, like in Tulsa, northeastern Oklahoma, kind of from start to finish from Friday and Saturday, again, could start off briefly as a mix, but then snow becomes kind of the dominant type of precipitation that we're watching. Something I like to show, we've kind of showed this on the last few days too, to just kind of give you perspective of where our heads are at, where our mindset is at when we're forecasting a winter storm or impactful wintry weather. Because, I mean, I know you know this, if you follow any number of weather folks on social media, particularly when it comes to wintry weather, the hype train starts building very early when these storm systems, these major type of winter storms, start showing up in the long-range data. But there's a reason why you don't hear someone like me or our team posting 8, 9, 10 days out from a storm saying, oh my gosh, look at this. This is crazy. This could happen or it might not. Because, again, there have been a lot of advances, a lot of amazing advances in the field of meteorology and the forecast data that we look at online. But still, the long and short of it is you get that far out, 7, 8, 9, 10 days out, there are just so many wide ranges of possibilities, so many ways that the forecast data can dramatically change. And by the way, spoiler alert, this happens a lot each winter. We get into wintertime, and pretty frequently, if you looked at any long-range forecast model on any given day, at 11, 12 days out, there's a solid chance that it probably shows some sort of huge winter storm in our area or other portions of nearby portions of the country. And then guess what? The next forecast model runs 6 hours later, it's gone because the models are changing so much, the data's changing so much, and going, oops, yeah, that was wrong. So that's the reason why we don't get all amped up about it that far out, because a lot of the times those don't pan out. But when we see more consistency building in the data, we get 5, 6 days out and go, okay, the trends are still there. Now, this is typically what these systems do. This time of year, we start going, okay, is this trend going to hold? Or are we seeing, trends to the north, trends to the south? We get 3 to 4 days out. If those trends are still holding, then we start having more confidence in going, okay, it looks like we're going to have something here. Now it's time to nail down, some of those variables I was talking about. Are we going to have that little warm nose that impacts the precip types? Are we going to have enough moisture to produce significant accumulation? And then when we're a couple days out from the system arriving, we can finally see some of those very fine scale details and have a lot more confidence in going, okay, looks like we're going to have this range of totals. This is the specific timing, that type of deal. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we don't, hold off on showing the specific totals and forecasts like that to be wishy-washy in any way. It's just our confidence grows the closer and closer we get, and the more and more we can see those fine scale details and variables that have a large impact on the forecast that are just really almost impossible to forecast 7, 8, 9 days out, but they're a lot more able to forecast those a couple days out. So that's why as we get closer and closer, you see more and more detail in the forecast, and also, we do all we can to not, just throw a graphic on social media that has a lot of big numbers, a lot of big colors on it, and go, oh my gosh, this probably won't happen, but just to get clicks, because that's, not what we're here to do. So having said all of that, I know there's kind of a lot of discussion about our process here. The early look here, and again, as I just discussed, kind of our process here, I'm not showing you specific snowfall forecast amounts yet on the screen. We're getting to the point where we're about to start doing that. You're going to, over the next, again, this video, we're posting this on Tuesday the 20th, and over the next, about 24 hours, you're going to be starting to see more specific forecasts on potential amounts from us on air and online as well. But this is kind of the first look at what we're thinking as far as the snowfall forecast and where the heaviest snows have so far been trending to line up Friday into Saturday. And if you see on the screen, actually, I'll take this full screen so you can maybe, for a second here, so you can maybe read that scale at the top a little bit. You see that little kind of horizontal scale up near the top where it says light, moderate, heavy, very heavy, and kind of the different colors associated with that. Generally, that lighter blue is where we would expect, at least so far, kind of the lighter snowfall amounts have been trending. And then where you see the darker blue and the purple, that's where some of the heavier snowfall amounts in our general kind of model trends have been going so far. And you can kind of see the trend there, and I put that on the screen as well. The trends so far have been heavier to the south into southern and southeastern Oklahoma, and maybe lighter to the north, or maybe more of a sharp cutoff to the north of Tulsa as far as the overall snowfall amounts. Again, one of the variables we talk about is maybe does dry air work its way into the system? And Arctic air is cold and also very dry air just by nature. And there's a trend that we have been seeing that the cold Arctic air, cold, dry Arctic air may work to keep the snow totals on the lower end, relatively speaking, in our northern counties, and that the storm track, kind of the most ideal track for the heaviest precipitation and therefore heavy snowfall totals, may set up in southern, southeastern Oklahoma. Now, again, how many times have I mentioned this? This can and still will change some between now and Friday and Saturday, but that has been the general trend we've been seeing. And something else I want to point out, by the way, and I mentioned travel impacts, not just for us in Oklahoma, something that I do think could be very concerning with this storm system from Friday and especially into Saturday, is it has a lot of moisture associated with it the further south you head into Texas, where initially they'll start with rain on Friday and then further into Friday night and Saturday transition into wintry precipitation. I've got some concerns about there being potentially major sleet and major ice accumulations across a large swath of Texas, central Texas into eastern Texas, into northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas, all the way into Mississippi. This could be very, very impactful for travel and for power outages and things like that across Texas and then into portions of the southeast United States. If there's a silver lining for us here in Green Country in Oklahoma, again, it's that it appears, like I mentioned earlier, that snow is overall our primary precipitation type. But just to the south, once you get near the Red River, and especially south of the Red River, they're in for more of kind of a mixture of everything, but in particular, possibly some significant ice from late Friday into Saturday across a good chunk of Texas and then into the southeast United States. So that's something to keep in mind as well for travel impacts into the weekend. And if you have family and friends in these areas, maybe some power outage impacts, and these are also areas that are going to be feeling the Arctic air too. So this will be a pretty major winter storm, it would appear, across a good portion of the southern United States, not just us. So that's just something I wanted to point out as well. So again, things that you can do right now and things you should start planning ahead for, because we've got a few days before this potentially major system moves in. From an Arctic air standpoint, if you hadn't done this already, because obviously we've had some frigid mornings and days here recently, so hopefully these are things that you've kind of already done through the winter. But if you protect your pipes, if you have those outdoor pipes and faucets, unhook those hoses, cover, insulate those faucets. Obviously, when we get into the bitter cold, dripping your faucets indoors, I know that's a thing that you hear a lot. Be very, very, very careful with space heaters. If you're using space heaters to heat your home or to heat, maybe I was going to say a pet's room, as I said, a dog house, that sort of thing. Be really careful with those. Don't leave them unattended, by the way, but obviously make sure that there's nothing anywhere close to those space heaters that could, potentially, warm up too much and catch fire. Check your smoke alarms, your carbon monoxide alarms, again, with things like space heaters and other things that you may be running to keep the house warm that can build up carbon monoxide. Unfortunately, that's something that can be very problematic for folks when we get into kind of these bitter cold conditions. Prep your vehicle now. You got a few days to do this to make sure that you keep fuel in the vehicle, make sure it's fueled up, it's not running on empty. Give yourself a full tank of gas. Check your tire pressure, because obviously when we get to the really cold air, your tire pressure really drops. So fill up your tires. Check your fluids, your antifreeze. Make sure you've got all your extra, winter weather, cold weather gear in your car: blankets, hats, gloves, and also, if you have sand or kitty litter for if you're planning to have to travel during some impactful winter weather Friday into Saturday, something that can give yourself extra traction if you maybe happen to get in trouble out on the roads. Obviously, it goes without saying, protect yourself. You need to have all the extra warm weather gear that you can have for yourself, for your kids. If you are taking care of loved ones, elderly, loved ones or friends that maybe don't have as much access to warm weather gear or to heaters and things of the like, make sure that they are protected. Because again, I said earlier, a lot of people, most everyone, really starts to focus in when we start talking about winter weather and snow. I know that gets people excited, and that's what they focus on, but I want you to really be aware that it's going to be very cold, bitterly cold this weekend and early next week, and that is just as much of a huge impact as anything else. And again, protect your pets. If they're outdoor pets, please make sure they've got warm and dry shelter, access to fresh, not frozen water. And also, it goes without saying, even for outdoor pets, it is going to be cold enough this weekend to early next week that if there's any possibility at all that you can bring those outdoor pets inside, please try to do that if all possible, because even if they've got warm, dry shelter through the weekend through early next week, it's still going to be too cold for them to even be outside. So as far as kind of the impacts that we're expecting from Friday into Saturday, again, there will be multiple waves of precipitation. I would say the brunt of the biggest impacts still focus on Saturday. Friday, that we're still nailing down the exact timing. By the way, I wouldn't expect to be seeing anything happening like Friday morning. So I don't want folks, at least the trends right now, to be waking up Friday morning at sunrise and not seeing anything happening and going, "Where's the storm, guys? I thought you guys said it was going to be is snowing and all that already." No, it does look like the first round of light precipitation starts developing on Friday, but it may be kind of more towards the second half of the day Friday, with, I think, the brunt of the heavier precipitation happening as we head into Saturday. Having said that, kind of the impacts that we're looking for is slick roads look to be a pretty significant hazard from Oklahoma to the south. Again, whether we've got snow here or kind of the icy mess that we're expecting to the south, wind chill factor and the hazards from wind chill and cold air, very, very high. Closings, there will obviously be impacts to closings. The reason I put that kind of more in the moderate range is we're going from Friday into Saturday. Of course, obviously, being in the weekend, that limits the amount of closures we would have to schools and things like that. But obviously, if we're talking about heavy snow accumulation or, bitter cold air of the sort, there will be closings. We're hopeful that the power outage situation stays low. Friday will be windy, all right? But what we're still, again, hopeful for is that when the brunt of the heavier precipitation moves from Friday night and then into Saturday, by that time it looks like the winds lighten up. So we're hoping that even in areas that see some heavier snow or heavier winter precipitation with lighter wind settling in, that can hopefully keep the power outage problem to a lower impact for us here in Green Country. Now, again, down in maybe Texas and parts of the southeast where they have more of an icy potential on their hands, that could be a different story. So just plan ahead now. I mentioned this earlier. If you got travel plans from the end of the week through the weekend, Friday, especially the later we get into Friday. Friday morning, as of now, Friday morning is still not looking too bad at all, just cold. May end up dry for the first half of Friday, but then the second half of Friday into Friday night, travel will likely start to be more significantly impacted. Saturday, as of now, we're expecting significant travel impacts across Oklahoma and the Southern Plains. And then Sunday is still kind of up in the air a little bit as far as how long the impacts continue to linger. And that depends on how long the storm system lingers. Some of the forecast model guidance, again, as we're still ironing this out, some of those forecast models still have some precipitation lingering all the way into Sunday. Other forecast model guidance says, no, it's winding down by Sunday. But either way, we're going to stay way below freezing. So even if the precipitation is winding down by early Sunday, the impacts will continue to linger because it's going to take a long time to melt off or clear off any precipitation off those roads, especially where it ends up being very, very heavy. Now, what could still change? Like I said, again, we don't try to throw in all these things to be uncertain or to say, well, hold on, I don't want to lock in on a forecast yet. But the truth is, there are still things that could change over the next few days as we head from now to the end of the week. So what could still change? The upper level storm track. Does it trend a little further north or a little further south? Even a a track change on that upper level low of 50 to 75 miles can have a huge impact on where the kind of the main corridor of upper level atmospheric lift goes, which will kind of change where the focus of some of the heaviest precipitation is. That can still change. The speed of the upper level storm system I just mentioned, will it be winding down by late Saturday, or will it linger into Sunday? Obviously, if it lingers further and further, into Sunday and through the end of the weekend, our snow totals could continue to go up. How much moisture is available, both at the ground level and the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere? Again, we're expecting a good amount of moisture to be available with the storm system, but there are always, potential monkey wrenches that can be thrown into the plan, for lack of a better word. And that in particular, I mentioned this earlier, the trend so far of lighter totals north of Tulsa and heavier totals south into southeastern Oklahoma. That would be another variable that we're watching too. The possibility that our northern counties could be kind of on a sharper cutoff line between lighter snowfall totals versus heavier snowfall totals. We'll continue to iron that out. And as I mentioned, there's going to be more specific accumulation forecasts coming through the rest of the week, even though I didn't give you specific numbers today. As we get into the rest of the week over the next 1 to 2 days, you're going to see more and more of kind of the details becoming more focused, coming into better focus as we give you updates on that on air and online through the rest of the week. Lots of discussions that we just had here today on This Week in Weather about this, what looks to be impending winter storm for Green Country, for Oklahoma, from Friday, starting late, starting Friday into the weekend. Like I said, Arctic air arriving Friday, and the precipitation picking up as the weekend goes along. Again, as of now, all signs point to this easily being the most impactful winter storm that we've had so far this winter, which technically doesn't say much, right? Because we've had basically no major winter storms so far this winter, but it looks like that this one could be quite impactful across a large portion of Oklahoma from a snowfall accumulation standpoint and from a bitter cold air standpoint. Again, I want to go back to that whether you end up being someone that gets lighter amounts of snow or heavier amounts of snow, everyone's going to have very cold air and potentially a several-day stretch of sub-freezing temperatures to deal with this weekend into early next week, and that will be quite impactful as well. So, like I said, there will continue to be more specifics coming on this forecast from us here at News on 6 as we go through the week. But the good news here is that we've got time to prepare for the cold air. We got time to prepare for travel impacts. And again, we time to not be too hyped up or freaking out about this, right? It just gives us all time to say, okay, here's what the forecast is trending. Here's what our latest updates on those amounts. Just plan ahead. If you had travel plans this weekend, I can't stop you from traveling, right? But I would consider maybe having some alternative plans if you were trying to travel this weekend, because the weather, this winter storm, one way or another, across Oklahoma and the southern plains in the southeast United States, as of now, looks like it could be quite impactful from a travel standpoint. So again, we'll have more updates on this for you throughout the week and into the weekend. And of course, we'll be covering it from start to finish for you when the winter storm does move in. So, like I always say, I appreciate you joining me for This Week in Weather. We'll be seeing you before next week, but I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I hope you stay safe this weekend. We'll help keep you safe this weekend as well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma's own digital studio live stream from the Bob Mills Weather Center. Stay with News on 6 online and on television anytime for the latest weather updates to keep you safe and informed.